This is the complete story of how a plank of wood with 4 wheels became one of the most influential subcultures on Earth. From drought-emptied swimming pools in California to Olympic arenas in Tokyo, skateboarding did not just survive, it rewrote the rules of sport, art, fashion, and rebellion along the way. Nobody set out to invent skateboarding. It showed up almost by accident, sometime in the late 1940s and early 1950s, when surfers in California wanted a way to ride waves that weren't there. They nailed roller skate wheels to wooden planks and called it sidewalk surfing. It was crude, it was dangerous, and the wheels, hard clay composites, were nearly unusable on anything but the smoothest pavement. A pebble could throw a rider off balance, and rain made the sport impossible. For nearly 2 decades, skateboarding existed as a novelty, a surfer's side hobby with no real identity of its own. Everything changed in 1972 when a surfer and entrepreneur named Frank Nasworthy discovered urethane, a material originally built for industrial rollers, and realized it could revolutionize skateboard wheels. Urethane gripped pavement instead of skidding across it. It absorbed shock, and it made turns predictable and speed controllable. Nasworthy's company, Cadillac Wheels, didn't just improve skateboarding, it created the sport as we now understand it. For the first time, skaters could carve, pump, and generate their own speed without a hill or a push. The urethane wheel is arguably the single most important piece of skateboarding technology ever made, and most people who've never touched a board have no idea it exists. By the mid-1970s, skateboarding had its equipment. What it needed was a place to happen, and California, ironically, handed it one through disaster. A severe drought hit the state in 1976 and 1977, and homeowners across Los Angeles were ordered to drain their backyard swimming pools to save water. To most people, an empty pool was just an inconvenience. To a group of teenagers in the Venice and Santa Monica area, it was an invitation. Those teenagers came from the Zephyr skate team, the Z-Boys, a loosely organized crew of surfers who trained under skate shop owner Jeff Ho and surfboard shaper Skip Engblom. The Z-Boys treated skateboarding the way they treated surfing, aggressive, low to the ground, carving hard turns instead of the stiff, upright style that had defined skating until then. When they found the drained pools, they realized the curved concrete walls mimicked the face of a wave, so they started riding vertical. They went higher, faster, more radically than anyone thought possible on 4 wheels. This wasn't just a new trick, it was a complete reinvention of what a skateboard could do. Riders like Tony Alva, Stacy Peralta, and Jay Adams turned pool riding into something between a sport and an art form, and their raw, aggressive style became the template for nearly everything that followed in skateboarding, from vert ramps to half pipes to the modern skate park bowl. The 1970s Dogtown era, named for the rough Venice Santa Monica neighborhood the Z-Boys called home, gets cited as the single most important cultural moment in skateboarding history. It's the moment skating stopped being a surfer's hobby and became its own identity. Skateboarding's explosive growth in the late 1970s came with a price. As more riders took to the streets, cities across America grew alarmed. Injuries were common, insurance liability became a nightmare for property owners, and skate parks, a booming new business model, began closing almost as fast as they opened, crushed by rising insurance premiums after a wave of lawsuits. Some towns passed outright ordinances restricting or banning skateboarding on public property, and skaters who had no formal representation and no political capital got treated less like athletes and more like a public nuisance. That period could have killed skateboarding entirely. Instead, it pushed the culture underground and made it stronger. Skaters built their own spots, empty drainage ditches, abandoned lots, backyard ramps built from scavenged plywood. DIY construction became part of the skateboarding identity itself, a value that still runs through the culture today. Being unwelcome in official spaces didn't stop skaters, it just changed where and how they rode. By the mid-1980s, skateboarding faced a new problem. Most of the vert ramps and pools that had defined the previous decade were gone, closed by the same liability fears that had shut down the parks. Skaters adapted again, and this time the shift ran even deeper. They took to the streets, literally. Curbs, stairs, handrails, parking blocks, and loading docks became the new terrain, and this was the birth of street skating, which needed an entirely different vocabulary of tricks. No single person shaped that vocabulary more than Rodney Mullen. A freestyle skater with an almost obsessive technical approach, Mullen invented or refined a huge share of the tricks that define modern skateboarding. The flat ground ollie, the kickflip, the impossible, the heel flip. What made Mullen's contribution so significant was not just the trick list, it was the underlying principle. He proved you did not need a ramp or a pool to do something extraordinary. You needed a flat piece of ground in the board itself. That idea unlocked street skating as a nationwide, then global phenomenon, because suddenly any sidewalk, any parking lot, any city block was a potential skate spot. As street skating exploded, it needed a way to spread beyond Southern California, and that job fell largely to skate media. Thrasher magazine, launched in 1981, became the defining voice of the culture, not just documenting tricks, but shaping the attitude, slang, and look that skaters everywhere would adopt. Thrasher's raw, anti-establishment tone mirrored the punk rock scene that skating had become tangled up with. The two subcultures fed each other. Skate videos featured punk soundtracks, punk shows drew skaters, and the shared DIY ethos, build it yourself, answer to no one, became the connective tissue between them. This is also when skateboarding started building its own economy, distinct from the surf industry it had originally spun off from. Independent skater-owned companies popped up throughout the 1980s and the 1990s, brands built by skaters, for skaters, often run out of garages and warehouses rather than corporate boardrooms. These companies didn't just sell boards, they sold identity, and the skateboarding industry that exists today, worth billions of dollars globally, traces its roots straight back to that scrappy, independent business culture. For most of its history, skateboarding lived at the margins of mainstream sports culture, tolerated, sometimes mocked, rarely respected. That began to shift hard in the late 1990s, driven in large part by one figure: Tony Hawk. Hawk had already been a dominant competitive vert skater for over a decade, but two things pushed him into mainstream consciousness. First, in 1999, he landed the 900 2.5 aerial rotations, a trick many had considered physically impossible, live in front of a national television audience at the X Games. It became one of the most replayed moments in action sports history. Second, later that same year, the video game Tony Hawk's Pro Skater launched and became a cultural phenomenon far beyond the skating world. It introduced millions of people who had never touched a skateboard to the sport's tricks, terrain, and soundtrack, and in doing so, it did more to popularize skateboarding globally than maybe any single event before it. Skateboarding wasn't just a subculture anymore, it was mainstream entertainment. The final and maybe most improbable chapter in skateboarding's mainstream journey came in 2016 when the International Olympic Committee announced that skateboarding would debut as an official Olympic sport at the Tokyo 2020 Games. For a culture that had spent decades defining itself against institutional authority, banned from sidewalks, chased off private property, dismissed by mainstream sports bodies, this was a stunning reversal. Skateboarding had gone from an activity cities tried to legislate out of existence to a sport with a podium and a national anthem. The Olympic inclusion was not without controversy inside the skate community itself. Some longtime skaters worried that formalizing skateboarding into a judge-standardized competition would strip away the creativity and individuality that had always defined it. Others saw it as overdue recognition for a discipline that demanded as much athleticism, courage, and technical mastery as any traditional sport, and both perspectives capture something true about skateboarding's identity. It has always lived in tension between rebellion and legitimacy, between being an outlaw pursuit and a serious athletic discipline. What connects a drained swimming pool in the 1970s Venice Beach to a purpose-built course in Tokyo's Ariake Urban Sports Park is not really about wheels or ramps or tricks, it is about adaptation. Every time skateboarding lost its space, when pools filled back up, when parks closed under insurance pressure, when cities passed bans, skaters did not disappear. They found new terrain, invented new techniques, and built new culture around whatever they had left. That resilience, more than any single trick or technology, is the real story of how a piece of wood changed the world. It did not happen because skateboarding got handed a place. It happened because skaters kept making one wherever they could find it.